I thought I was just helping my neighbor's kid with homework. Until she leaned over and whispered, "I saw Mom with Mr. Thompson." And just like that, I knew something was very wrong. Most evenings at the Carter house felt calm in the quiet, predictable way that makes a neighborhood feel safe. I'd been helping their daughter Lily with her homework for a few months now, nothing formal, just something I offered after running into Mrs. Carter at the mailbox one afternoon. She mentioned Lily was struggling a little with math, and since I'd always been decent at it, I told her I could stop by a few evenings a week. That night felt no different from the others. We were sitting at the dining room table under a warm yellow lamp. Outside, the sun had already dipped behind the houses, leaving the street wrapped in a soft evening blue. The dishwasher hummed quietly in the kitchen, and somewhere down the street a dog barked once before everything settled back into silence. Lily was hunched over her workbook, her pencil moving slowly across the page as she tried to solve a long division problem. "Okay," I said gently, leaning over to look at her paper. "Let's try that step again." She nodded but didn't answer right away. Instead, she kept staring at the numbers like they were suddenly much harder than before. I noticed something then. Her small fingers were nervously twisting the corner of the page, over and over, like she was working up the courage to say something. "You all right?" I asked. She glanced toward the hallway that led to the living room, as if making sure no one was nearby. Then she leaned closer to me across the table. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I saw Mom with Mr. Thompson." For a moment, I didn't fully process what she meant. Mr. Thompson lived 3 houses down. He was friendly enough, the kind of neighbor who waved while mowing his lawn or chatted briefly during block barbecues. So my first thought was simple. "Oh," I said casually. "Where'd you see them?" "At the grocery store parking lot," Lily murmured. She kept her eyes on the table as she spoke. "They were in his car." I shrugged slightly, trying to keep things light. "Well, maybe they were just talking." But Lily shook her head almost immediately. "Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just a slow, uncertain shake." "They were hugging," she said quietly. The room suddenly felt heavier. The warm hum of the dishwasher seemed louder now, filling the silence between us. I searched for something reasonable to say. Kids misunderstand things all the time. Maybe she saw a goodbye hug. Maybe it was completely innocent. "Sometimes adults hug when they say hello or goodbye," I explained gently. But Lily's voice came even softer this time. "It didn't look like that." She finally looked up at me then, her eyes carrying a kind of confusion no kid should have to deal with. I felt something uncomfortable settle in my chest. Not anger. Not even suspicion exactly. Just unease. Mrs. Carter had always seemed like the kind of person who kept things together. Calm. Kind. The type of mom who remembered everyone's birthdays and brought extra cupcakes to school events. The idea that something complicated might be happening behind that quiet smile felt strange. Still, I forced a reassuring smile. "You might have just seen something out of context," I said. Lily nodded slowly, but she didn't look convinced. Neither, if I was honest, was I. And as we turned back to the math problem sitting between us on the table, I realized something unsettling. A simple whisper from an 8-year-old had just planted a thought in my mind that wasn't going to disappear anytime soon. The next afternoon felt unusually warm for early spring. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the quiet street as I walked back from the corner store with a small grocery bag in my hand. Our neighborhood was the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to change much. Same trimmed lawns. Same familiar faces. Same slow rhythm of life. But as I turned onto our street, I saw her. Mrs. Carter stood in her front yard beside a row of flower beds, gently watering the plants that lined the walkway to her porch. The sunlight caught the spray of water from the hose, turning it into a faint mist that shimmered in the air. She looked up when she heard my footsteps. "Oh hey," she said with a soft smile. "Back from the store?" I nodded, lifting the bag slightly. "Yeah. Just grabbing a few things. Mrs. Carter had always been easy to talk to. At 42, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that made people naturally comfortable around her. She wasn't flashy or overly dressed. Today she wore a simple light blue sweater and jeans, but there was something graceful about the way she moved. The kind of presence that didn't demand attention, yet somehow held it anyway. Before yesterday, I probably wouldn't have noticed much beyond that. But now, things felt different. Not because she had changed. Because my perspective had. I stepped closer to the garden, watching the stream of water soak into the dark soil. "Your flowers are looking good," I said. She laughed softly. "They're surviving. That's about the best I can hope for." The laugh was light, but something about it felt a little forced. Not obvious enough for most people to notice. But I did. Maybe it was Lily's whisper still lingering in the back of my mind. Mrs. Carter shut off the hose and walked over to set the nozzle on the porch railing. For a moment, we stood side by side near the steps. A light breeze drifted down the street, carrying the faint scent of lavender. It took me a second to realize it was coming from her lotion or perfume, something subtle but warm. "You're still helping Lily with her homework tonight, right?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "She's getting better at math." Her expression softened instantly. "That means a lot, you know," she said. "She really looks forward to those evenings." As she turned to face me, a loose strand of her dark hair slipped forward. Without thinking, she tucked it gently behind her ear. It was a small gesture. Ordinary. But somehow, the moment lingered. She reached down beside the porch and picked up the watering can she'd left there earlier. When she handed it toward me so I could move it onto the step, our fingers brushed briefly. Just a quick contact. Barely a second. Still, the warmth of it caught me slightly off guard. We both pulled back almost immediately. Neither of us acknowledged it. But the moment hung in the quiet air between us. Mrs. Carter cleared her throat softly. "Well," she said, brushing her hands together lightly, "I should probably start dinner soon." I nodded. "See you later tonight." She smiled again, warm, familiar. But as she walked toward the front door, something about her expression shifted when she thought I wasn't looking. The smile faded. Just slightly. Like someone carrying a weight they didn't quite know how to set down. And standing there in the fading sunlight, I realized something uncomfortable. Before Lily said anything, Mrs. Carter had simply been my neighbor. Now, whether I wanted it or not, I was starting to notice things I'd never paid attention to before. Over the next couple of weeks, life in the neighborhood continued the way it always had. Cars came and went. Lawns were mowed on Saturday mornings. Kids rode their bikes up and down the street until the porch lights flicked on. On the surface, nothing seemed different. But once you start noticing small things, it becomes hard to stop. I still came over to the Carter house 3 evenings a week to help Lily with her homework. Most nights we sat at the same dining room table, the warm yellow lamp casting a soft circle of light over her notebooks. Lily was getting better at math. But sometimes I caught her glancing toward the hallway that led to her parents' bedroom, like she was listening for something. Or someone. Mr. Carter was rarely home during those evenings. I'd met him plenty of times before, tall, quiet, always polite but usually in a hurry. He worked long hours managing a logistics company across town. From what I understood, his job kept him late most nights. At first, I didn't think much of it. But the more evenings I spent there, the more a quiet pattern began to reveal itself. Mrs. Carter was almost always alone. One night, after Lily finished her homework early, she ran upstairs to grab a book she wanted to show me. I was gathering the worksheets when Mrs. Carter appeared in the kitchen doorway. "You look like you survived another math battle," she joked lightly. I smiled. "Barely." She stepped further into the room, carrying 2 mugs in her hands. "I made tea," she said. "Thought you might want some." The steam curled gently from the cups as she set one in front of me. The scent of chamomile drifted into the air, warm and calming. "Thanks," I said. She sat down across from me at the table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Outside, the faint sound of cicadas filled the night air through the slightly open window. Mrs. Carter wrapped both hands around her mug, staring into the rising steam. "Quiet tonight," she murmured. "Yeah." I hesitated before asking, "Mr. Carter working late again?" She nodded. "Most nights lately." Her voice wasn't bitter. Just tired. She took a small sip of tea before continuing. "You know, when we first moved here, he used to get home before dinner almost every day." There was a small smile on her lips, but it carried a hint of nostalgia. "Things just get busy, I guess." I nodded, unsure what to say. The conversation drifted for a moment before she asked about my job, my plans, normal things neighbors talked about. But the longer we sat there, the more the quiet between topics seemed to grow. At one point, she reached across the table to pass me a small bowl of sugar cubes. Her fingers brushed lightly against my wrist. It was accidental. But neither of us pulled away immediately. Just a second too long. Then she quickly withdrew her hand and gave a small, apologetic smile. "Sorry." "It's okay," I said. Lily's footsteps suddenly thundered down the stairs, breaking the moment. "I found it," she shouted excitedly, waving her book. Mrs. Carter laughed softly, the tension dissolving as she turned toward her daughter. But later that night, as I walked home under the streetlights, something about that conversation stayed with me. Because for the first time I saw something in Mrs. Carter that I hadn't noticed before. Not guilt. Not secrecy. Loneliness. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies. The quiet kind. The kind that shows itself in long evenings on the porch, and tea shared at a kitchen table after the house grows silent. And suddenly, Lily's whisper from that night weeks ago didn't feel like gossip anymore. It felt like a crack in something that had been slowly breaking for a long time. It was close to midnight when I stepped outside that night. Sleep hadn't come easily. The house felt too quiet, my mind still circling the same thoughts that had been lingering for weeks now. Lily's whisper. The quiet evenings at the Carter house. The subtle sadness that sometimes slipped into Mrs. Carter's smile. So I decided to take a walk. Our street was calm at that hour. Porch lights glowed softly along the sidewalks, and the air carried that cool, peaceful stillness that only shows up late at night. As I passed the Carter house, I noticed a small light glowing on their porch. At first, I assumed someone had simply forgotten to turn it off. But as I got closer, I saw her. Mrs. Carter was sitting on the wooden porch steps, her arms loosely wrapped around her knees. Her head was tilted slightly upward, watching the quiet stretch of stars above the rooftops. She looked different somehow. Not in appearance, she was still wearing the same soft cardigan she'd had on earlier that evening, her hair loosely gathered behind her shoulders. But there was something heavier in the way she sat there. Like someone carrying thoughts they hadn't said out loud yet. When she heard my footsteps on the sidewalk, she looked down and spotted me. "Oh," she said softly. "Hey." I stopped near the bottom of the steps. "Couldn't sleep either?" I asked. She gave a faint smile. "Something like that." For a moment, neither of us moved. The streetlight down the road cast a gentle glow across the front yard, and the night air carried the distant sound of wind moving through the trees. "Mind if I sit for a minute?" I asked. She shifted slightly and nodded. "Sure." I sat down beside her on the steps, leaving a respectful space between us. Up close, I noticed the faint redness around her eyes. She'd either been crying earlier, or was trying very hard not to. "You okay?" I asked quietly. She let out a slow breath. "Yeah," she said automatically. Then she shook her head slightly. "Actually, not really." Her fingers traced absent circles along the wooden step beneath her. For a while, she didn't say anything else. And I didn't push. Sometimes people just need a little silence before the words come. Eventually, she spoke again. You ever feel like your life slowly turned into something you didn't quite expect? Her voice was calm, but fragile. I thought about the question for a moment before answering. Yeah, I said. I think most people probably do. She nodded slowly, staring out at the empty street. I never planned on things feeling this lonely. The word lingered in the air. Not angry. Not bitter. Just honest. She rubbed her hands together lightly, as if trying to warm them. I love my family, she said quickly. More than anything. Then she swallowed. But sometimes I feel like I disappeared somewhere along the way. My chest tightened slightly hearing that. After a moment, she said something that made the quiet night feel even heavier. I've been seeing someone. She didn't look at me when she said it. Just kept staring ahead. Mr. Thompson, she added softly. The name landed exactly the way I expected it to. Still, hearing it out loud felt different. Real. I didn't plan it, she continued quickly. It started as conversations, someone asking how I was doing. Her voice trembled slightly. And when someone finally notices you after feeling invisible for so long, she stopped there. Her hands rose to her face for a second, covering her eyes. Without thinking too much about it, I gently placed my hand on her shoulder. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned slightly into the touch, like someone who had been holding themselves together for too long. Neither of us spoke for a while after that. Just two people sitting quietly under the porch light, holding the weight of a truth that had finally been said out loud. A few days passed after that night on the porch, but the quiet confession Mrs. Carter had shared with me refused to leave my mind. I tried to go about things normally. Homework sessions with Lily continued like they always had. The same dining room table. The same soft glow of the lamp. The same scratch of pencil against paper as she worked through her math problems. But now there was something else in the room too. Something unspoken. Mrs. Carter moved through the house the same way she always had, calm, kind, attentive. If anything, she seemed even more patient with Lily lately. She lingered longer during dinner, asked more questions about school, and laughed a little louder at her daughter's stories. Almost like she was trying to protect those small moments. That evening, Lily finished her homework faster than usual. She pushed her notebook aside with a small sigh of relief. I think I'm finally getting the hang of this, she said proudly. You definitely are, I replied with a smile. She grinned, pleased with herself. Then, slowly, the grin faded. Her eyes drifted toward the hallway for a moment before returning to me. Can I ask you something? She said quietly. The tone of her voice immediately made my stomach tighten. Sure, I said gently. She slid out of her chair and walked around the table until she stood beside me. For a second, she just stared down at the floor, shifting her weight nervously. Then she leaned slightly against my arm. The gesture was small, innocent, the kind of quiet comfort kids seek without even realizing it. Are Mom and Dad going to split up? The question hit harder than I expected. I felt my chest tighten as I looked down at her. There it was. The thing adults always try to hide. Kids still feel it anyway. The tension. The distance. The late nights and quiet conversations behind closed doors. They notice more than we think. I took a slow breath, choosing my words carefully. Why are you asking that? I said softly. Lily shrugged a little. They don't talk much anymore. Her voice had that careful, thoughtful tone kids use when they're trying to explain something they don't fully understand. And Dad's always working. She hesitated again before adding the part that really worried her. And Mom seems sad sometimes. My heart sank hearing that. I placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Hey, I said quietly. Sometimes grown-ups go through rough patches. It doesn't mean they stop caring about each other. She looked up at me. But what if they do? The fear in her eyes was small but real. I gave her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. Families go through difficult moments sometimes, I said. But that doesn't mean everything falls apart. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she rested her head briefly against my arm. It was only for a second or two. But the trust in that small gesture felt heavy. I just don't want things to change, she whispered. Neither did I. But standing there in the quiet dining room, I realized something important. The secret Mrs. Carter had shared with me wasn't just about her marriage anymore. It was about Lily too. About a little girl trying to make sense of emotions she shouldn't have to carry. And that realization brought a difficult thought into my mind. Maybe the biggest problem wasn't the mistake Mrs. Carter had made. Maybe it was how long everyone had been pretending nothing was wrong. After Lily asked me that question, something inside me wouldn't settle anymore. Her small voice kept replaying in my head. Are Mom and Dad going to split up? It wasn't accusation. It wasn't anger. Just fear. The kind of quiet fear that sits in a child's chest when the world they depend on starts to feel uncertain. For the next few days, I kept wondering if I should say something to Mrs. Carter, or if it wasn't my place at all. I wasn't family. I wasn't part of their marriage. But I was part of Lily's evenings, part of the quiet moments in that house. And now I carried a piece of the truth that was slowly affecting everyone under that roof. Eventually, the weight of it became too much to ignore. One evening after Lily finished her homework and ran upstairs to take a shower, I found Mrs. Carter standing alone at the kitchen counter. She was rinsing dishes slowly under the sink light, the warm glow casting soft shadows across the room. For a moment, I just watched. She looked tired. Not physically exhausted, but emotionally worn down. Like someone who had been holding too many thoughts inside for too long. Mrs. Carter, I said gently. She turned, offering a polite smile. Yeah. I hesitated for a second before stepping a little closer to the counter. There's something I think you should know. The smile faded slightly. She turned off the faucet, drying her hands slowly on a towel as she waited for me to continue. I chose my words carefully. Lily asked me something the other night. Her expression tightened almost instantly. What did she ask? I swallowed. She asked if you and Mr. Carter were going to split up. The kitchen went completely quiet. Mrs. Carter didn't move. Didn't speak. Her eyes lowered to the counter in front of her. I didn't tell her anything specific, I added quickly. I just told her that families go through hard moments sometimes. She nodded faintly. But I could see the emotion building behind her eyes. I think she's noticing more than you realize, I said gently. For a long moment, Mrs. Carter said nothing. Then she leaned back against the counter and closed her eyes. A slow breath escaped her lips. I never wanted Lily to feel that, she whispered. Her voice trembled slightly. She deserves better than this. The strength she usually carried seemed to soften right there in front of me. She rubbed her temples briefly before speaking again. I told myself it wasn't hurting anyone, she admitted quietly. That it was just someone to talk to. Someone who noticed me. Her eyes glistened now. But secrets don't stay small forever, do they? I shook my head gently. No. They usually don't. For a moment, she stared at the floor. Then suddenly her hand reached out, gripping my wrist lightly. Not desperate. Just seeking grounding. I never meant for things to go this far, she said softly. A tear finally slipped down her cheek. I love my family. Her voice broke slightly as she said the next words. I don't want to lose them. Without thinking too much, I placed my other hand over hers. The contact was simple, steady. You still have time to fix things, I said quietly. She looked up at me then, eyes searching my face. For the first time since I'd known her, she didn't look like the composed woman who always held everything together. She looked vulnerable. Human. And standing there in the quiet kitchen, I realized this was the moment where everything could change, depending on the choice she made next. The days after that conversation felt strangely quiet. Not in the usual comfortable way our neighborhood often felt, but in a more thoughtful way, like the air itself was waiting to see what would happen next. I still came by the Carter house to help Lily with her homework, but something subtle had shifted. Mrs. Carter seemed different. Not distant. Just reflective. She moved through the house with the same gentle patience she always had, but there was a seriousness in her expression now. Like someone who had spent a long night thinking about the direction of their life. One evening, about a week later, I arrived just as Mr. Carter's truck pulled into the driveway. That alone felt unusual. He usually came home much later. He stepped out of the truck, adjusting his jacket as he walked toward the front door. When he saw me on the sidewalk, he gave a friendly nod. "Evening." "Hey," I replied. Inside the house, Lily was already setting her books on the dining table. "Dad's home early," she whispered excitedly. I could hear Mrs. Carter moving around in the kitchen, the soft clinking of dishes filling the air. A few minutes later, Mr. Carter joined us in the dining room. "Math night again," he said with a small smile. Lily grinned proudly. "I got an A on my quiz today." "That's my girl," he said, ruffling her hair. The moment felt simple, ordinary. But somehow it carried a warmth that hadn't been there before. Later that evening, after Lily finished her homework and ran upstairs to get ready for bed, I gathered my things to head home. As I stepped onto the porch, Mrs. Carter followed behind me. "Hey," she said softly. I turned. For a moment, she just stood there in the glow of the porch light, her hands tucked loosely into the sleeves of her sweater. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "For what?" "For being honest with me." She stepped down onto the porch beside me. "I ended things with Mr. Thompson." Her voice was calm, not dramatic or emotional. Just certain. "I realized something after we talked," she continued. "I was looking for comfort somewhere else instead of fixing what was broken at home." I nodded slowly. "That couldn't have been easy." She shook her head slightly. "No, but it was the right thing." For a moment, we both stood there in the cool night air. Through the living room window behind her, I could see Mr. Carter sitting on the couch while Lily showed him something on her tablet. Their quiet laughter drifted faintly outside. Mrs. Carter followed my gaze. A small smile appeared on her face. "We've started talking again," she said. "Really talking." She took a step closer and wrapped her arms around me in a gentle hug. It wasn't sudden or awkward. Just warm. Grateful. I returned the hug lightly, feeling the sincerity in it. After a moment, she stepped back. "Sometimes people lose their way," she said quietly. "But that doesn't mean they can't find their way back." I smiled. As I walked down the driveway toward the sidewalk, I glanced back once. Mrs. Carter was still standing on the porch, watching her family through the window. Not with sadness. Not with regret. But with the quiet determination of someone who had made a difficult choice, and was ready to protect the life that mattered most.